The late afternoon sun dipped low over Crest Hill Mall's sprawling parking lot, turning rows of vehicles into streaks of chrome and shadow. At the very edge of the lot, near the cracked pavement where weeds fought for survival, sat a faded 1996 Toyota Corolla, paint peeling, side mirror taped, exhaust puffing with each crank of the engine. The car belonged to Ruth Lynn Johnson, a woman in her mid-30s. Her curly black hair was tucked into a plain scarf, her skin glistened from the heat, and her clothes were simple, a faded blouse and dark trousers. She had the quiet poise of someone used to being underestimated. Ruth Lynn clutched her worn leather handbag close as she slid into the driver's seat. That's when the laugh came. It was sharp, mocking, designed to pierce. "You actually drive that thing?" a male voice jeered. Ruth Lynn froze. Turning her head, she saw a man leaning casually against a gleaming Tesla Model X parked a few spots away. He was tall, early 40s, his salt and pepper hair styled slick, a tailored navy suit hugging his athletic frame. His smile was wide but dripping with arrogance. "Lady, that car belongs in a museum. I didn't even know those still ran," he added, chuckling to himself. Ruth Lynn's eyes narrowed. She didn't say a word. Instead, she adjusted her seatbelt. But the stranger wasn't done. He strolled closer, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "I mean, no offense, but you pulling up in that relic? You look like somebody struggling auntie. Why not upgrade? What's the point of working hard if you're still rolling around in?" He didn't finish. Because Ruth Lynn finally spoke, her voice calm but laced with something firm, almost unshakable. "Do you always measure people by their car?" The man blinked, caught off guard. But then he smirked. "In this world? Of course. Cars show success, power, status. They show who you are." Ruth Lynn held his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, with a faint smile, she muttered, "Then you've already revealed who you are." Before the man could reply, the Corolla's engine roared to life with a sputter. Ruth Lynn drove off, leaving him standing there, jaw tightened, his mocking laugh now fading into an uneasy silence. What the man didn't know was that this woman he ridiculed was far more than she appeared. And their paths were only just beginning to cross. The stranger's name was Clifford Hale. In his world, image was everything. He was the senior vice president of Hale and Archer Real Estate, a company that prided itself on glossy skyscrapers, luxury condos, and polished sales pitches. Clifford had grown accustomed to measuring worth by possessions. The designer watches, the luxury cars, the upscale homes. But Ruth Lynn Johnson lingered in his mind long after she drove away. Her words, "Then you've already revealed who you are," had stung in a way he couldn't admit. He tried to laugh it off that evening at his downtown penthouse, sipping wine as the city lights glittered through the glass walls. But the more he thought, the more it nagged him. Why would a woman driving such a rundown car carry herself with such calm authority? A week later, fate answered that question. Clifford was attending the Crest Hill Economic Forum, a gathering of investors, entrepreneurs, and city leaders. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, tables dressed in white linen, and guests in designer suits and evening gowns. Clifford felt at home in such settings. He thrived on networking, shaking hands, and making deals. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, a woman who has quietly changed lives across our city. She's the founder of Johnson Pathways, a community initiative that has funded over 100 scholarships, launched small businesses, and restored housing in underserved neighborhoods. Please welcome, Ms. Ruth Lynn Johnson." Clifford's wine glass froze midway to his lips. Walking gracefully onto the stage was the very same woman he had mocked in the parking lot. She wore a simple but elegant emerald dress, her natural beauty radiating under the lights. Her posture carried no arrogance, only quiet strength. And the room erupted in applause. Clifford shifted in his chair, suddenly feeling small despite his tailored suit. Ruth Lynn began to speak. "Success is not defined by what we wear, what we drive, or how loudly we boast. True success is measured by how many lives we lift, how many doors we open for others. I know what it's like to be underestimated. I know what it's like to start from nothing. And that is why I built Johnson Pathways, to ensure that no one is defined by their circumstances. The audience hung on her every word. But Clifford sat frozen, heat rising to his face. The woman he had laughed at, mocked so casually, was someone deeply respected, someone who had achieved far more than he had assumed. As the applause thundered again, Ruthlin's eyes scanned the crowd. For just a second they landed on Clifford. Her gaze was cool, unflinching, and it felt like a mirror held to his soul. Clifford quickly looked away. But destiny wasn't finished weaving their connection. Because after the event, as he made his way toward the valet line, Clifford spotted Ruthlyn again. This time she was surrounded by young people, students, entrepreneurs, families, thanking her for changing their lives. And as Clifford's own sleek Tesla pulled up, Ruthlyn's old Corolla arrived beside it, rattling slightly. Without hesitation, she climbed in, waved warmly at the people around her, and drove off with the same quiet dignity as before. Clifford stood there, torn between shame and intrigue. For the first time in years he wondered if maybe, just maybe, his idea of success was built on the wrong foundation. But he also knew something else. His pride would not let him walk away without proving himself. And that pride was about to pull both their lives into a storm neither of them expected. For the next several days, Clifford couldn't shake Ruthlyn from his thoughts. The image of her commanding that stage, speaking with such conviction, haunted him. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't desperate for attention. And yet, she held more influence than half the CEOs he knew. But Clifford's pride was a stubborn thing. Instead of humility, he chose competition. One morning in his high-rise office overlooking Crest Hill's skyline, Clifford called his assistant. "Find me everything on Johnson Pathways. Who funds it, how it operates, and what their weaknesses are. I want details." His assistant hesitated. "Weaknesses, sir?" "Yes," Clifford snapped. "If she thinks she's redefining success, then I'll redefine it bigger. Better. We'll start a new outreach program under Hale and Archer Real Estate. We'll crush hers by sheer scale." Within days, Clifford announced his own initiative, Futurize, a program promising housing projects, scholarships, and mentorships. His press conference was sleek. Banners, cameras, a speech rehearsed to perfection. But even as reporters snapped photos, whispers ran through the crowd. "Isn't this just copying Johnson Pathways? Looks like a PR stunt. Where's the authenticity?" Clifford forced a smile, but he heard every word. Meanwhile, Ruthlyn kept working quietly. She was in the community daily, visiting schools, meeting single parents, helping young entrepreneurs pitch ideas. She wasn't after headlines, she was after transformation. One Friday evening, their worlds collided again. Both were invited to a private networking dinner at the Crest Hill Country Club. Clifford arrived first, gliding through the marble lobby in his tailored gray suit. When Ruthlyn entered, the room shifted. She wore a modest navy gown, her natural curls falling freely. Conversations paused, respect followed her like a shadow. Clifford forced himself to walk over. "Ms. Johnson," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "Impressive keynote the other night." Her eyes flicked to his hand, then back to his face. She shook it politely but firmly. "Mr. Hale, I hear you've started a program of your own." Clifford grinned. "Futurize." "Yes. We believe in expanding opportunities. After all, competition is healthy, right?" Ruthlyn studied him. "Competition? Or ego?" Her words sliced clean and Clifford's jaw tightened. "I don't think giving back should be monopolized," he retorted. "Neither do I," Ruthlyn replied calmly. "But if you're building to be seen, you're not building to last." Clifford's smile faltered. He felt exposed, like she could see straight through the polished armor he wore. Before he could respond, the dinner bell chimed, calling everyone to the grand hall. But the sting of her words followed him to his seat. Throughout the night, Clifford noticed something unsettling. Whenever Ruthlyn spoke, people leaned in. Whenever he tried to speak, people nodded politely but returned their attention to her. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't status. It was something intangible, trust, authenticity, a quiet power money couldn't buy. For the first time in his life, Clifford Hale wondered if he was on the wrong side of the story. Yet even as that thought gnawed at him, another part of him burned hotter. If Ruth Lynn was going to challenge him, he would challenge her right back. And soon, his pride would set in motion a public clash that neither of them could avoid. 2 weeks later, Crest Hill's City Hall courtyard was packed. News vans lined the streets, cameras pointed at a podium where city officials were set to announce new community funding partnerships. Both FutureRise and Johnson Pathways had been invited. Ruth Lynn stood off to the side with her volunteers, students in matching t-shirts, small business owners, single mothers who had received her program's support. They weren't paid to be there, they came out of loyalty and gratitude. Clifford arrived moments later, stepping out of his Tesla with a small entourage. His FutureRise banner flapped proudly behind the stage. He wore a crisp blue suit, pocket square perfect, smile rehearsed. The mayor stepped up first. Crest Hill is at a turning point, he announced. Today we're proud to highlight 2 initiatives shaping our city's future. Johnson Pathways, which has quietly changed lives for over a decade, and FutureRise, a bold new effort from Hale and Archer Real Estate. Applause followed. Clifford straightened, already imagining tomorrow's headlines. But when the mayor invited Ruth Lynn to speak first, something happened Clifford didn't expect. Ruth Lynn didn't boast. She didn't advertise. She simply told stories. She introduced a young man named Andre who once lived in a shelter but, through Johnson Pathways, earned a scholarship and was now studying engineering. She called up Marisol, a single mother who started her own catering business with a small grant. She even mentioned the neighborhood playgrounds her program had restored, where children now played safely every evening. The crowd wasn't just listening, they were moved. Some wiped away tears. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters scribbled furiously. Then it was Clifford's turn. He walked up, cleared his throat, and began with his signature charm. FutureRise represents Crest Hill's bold leap into tomorrow. We are committed to luxury housing that trickles down opportunities. But a murmur rippled through the crowd. His words sounded hollow next to Ruth Lynn's. He pivoted, trying to inject warmth. We too will fund scholarships. We will, create mentorship programs just like. His voice trailed as he realized he was parroting Ruth Lynn's model. Reporters exchanged looks. The audience shifted restlessly. And then a student in Ruth Lynn's volunteer shirt raised his hand. Excuse me, Mr. Hale, are you here to help us or to compete with Ms. Johnson? The question hung heavy in the air. Clifford's smile faltered. Cameras zoomed in. I'm here to expand, he stammered. To bring bigger resources. Resources without heart, someone muttered loudly from the crowd. Laughter and murmurs followed. Clifford's ears burned. This was supposed to be his moment of triumph, but instead, it was unraveling. And when he looked to the side, he saw Ruth Lynn watching him, not smugly, not triumphantly, but with that same steady calm that unsettled him from the start. It was infuriating. After the event, as reporters swarmed Ruth Lynn with questions and gratitude, Clifford slipped out the side entrance, his fists clenched. For the first time in years he felt small. Back in his penthouse that night, Clifford stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had the car, the penthouse, the title. But in one afternoon, Ruth Lynn Johnson had made all of it feel meaningless. And Clifford's pride wouldn't allow that to stand. He picked up his phone, dialed a number, and said coldly, "Dig deeper into her. I don't care what it takes. Everyone has a flaw. Find hers." What Clifford didn't know was that in searching for Ruth Lynn's flaw, he was about to uncover something far more dangerous. Something that would entangle both their lives in a storm of secrets. Clifford had always believed money could buy answers. So when he instructed his private investigator, Leon Brackett, to dig into Ruth Lynn Johnson's life, he expected results in days. Leon was efficient. A week later, he slid a thick envelope across Clifford's mahogany desk. Clifford tore it open eagerly. Inside were photographs, documents, clippings. But instead of scandal or fraud, the first pages told a story Clifford hadn't anticipated. Ruth Lynn had once been homeless. She'd worked 2 jobs while sleeping in her car, the same beat-up Corolla she still drove today. That car had been her shelter, her shield against the world when she had nothing else. Clifford frowned, flipping through more pages. He found her record of applying for grants, volunteering at shelters, tutoring children for free. There was no fraud, no corruption, no hidden wealth. Just grit, sacrifice, and perseverance. Is this it? Clifford demanded. Leon cleared his throat. There's one more thing, sir. It's sensitive. He handed over a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local woman's brother wrongly convicted in Crest Hill scandal. Clifford scanned the article. Years ago, Ruthlin's younger brother, Darius, had been sentenced for a crime he didn't commit. The conviction had torn her family apart, and while Darius served time, Ruthlin had fought tirelessly to prove his innocence. She had even mortgaged her future to hire lawyers, though the case remained unresolved. Clifford leaned back, stunned. This wasn't a weakness. This was tragedy and strength. But Leon wasn't finished. Here's the twist. The real estate firm tied to that scandal? Hale and Archer. The blood drained from Clifford's face. Hale and Archer. His family's company. The empire he represented. The very place where his father had built his fortune. And suddenly it all made sense. Why Ruthlin had looked at him that way. Why she carried herself with such guarded composure. Her fight wasn't just against poverty or doubt, it was against the very machine Clifford stood on top of. Clifford slammed the folder shut, his chest tight. For the first time he felt trapped between two identities, the ambitious heir who had built his career on image, and the man who had just glimpsed the devastating cost of his family's legacy. That evening, Ruthlin sat at her small kitchen table, sipping tea while reviewing scholarship applications. The old Corolla was parked outside, still running, still faithful. She thought of Darius, still fighting appeals from behind cold prison walls. She didn't know Clifford was staring at the same file that contained her brother's story. She didn't know his world had just been shaken to the core. But soon their paths would collide again. And this time it wouldn't just be about pride or cars. It would be about justice, truth, and the painful cost of exposing it. Because Clifford now faced a choice. Protect his family's empire, or stand beside the woman he once mocked in the parking lot. And that choice would decide both their futures. The next city forum was different from all the others. It wasn't about press releases or polished speeches. This time the discussion was raw, centered on justice reform and housing ethics. The crowd was larger than ever. Students, families, city leaders, even reporters from national outlets. Ruthlin sat in the front row, calm as always, but her heart was heavy. Darius's appeal hearing was weeks away, and the scars of his wrongful conviction were fresh on her spirit. Yet she showed up because community needed her voice. Clifford arrived late. Not in his Tesla, not flanked by assistants, but alone, carrying a slim folder. His polished armor, the tailored bravado, was gone. His suit was plain, his expression tight. When the moderator called his name, Clifford walked to the podium, gripping the microphone with unsteady hands. The audience braced for another corporate pitch. But instead, Clifford cleared his throat and said words no one expected. My name is Clifford Hale. I've spent my life chasing status, wealth, and image. But standing here today, I can't pretend any longer. I need to tell you the truth. A murmur rippled through the hall. Ruthlin tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. Clifford opened the folder and held up the faded newspaper clipping Leon had found. Years ago, a man named Darius Johnson was convicted in a scandal tied to my family's company, Hale and Archer Real Estate. Documents were buried. Evidence was mishandled. And while my family built luxury towers, his family was torn apart. The room went silent. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing. Ruthlin's breath caught in her chest. Clifford's voice shook but grew steadier with each word. I mocked his sister, Ruthlin, in a parking lot. I laughed at her car, not knowing that car once sheltered her when she had nothing else. I tried to outshine her work, not realizing her work was born from pain my own family helped cause. Gasps filled the room. Clifford glanced toward Ruthlin. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes glistened. He continued, I cannot undo what was done. But I can no longer hide behind silence. Today I'm turning over every internal file Hale and Archer ever buried on that case. I'm resigning from my position, and I'm dedicating my resources to ensure Darius Johnson's name is cleared. The hall erupted, some in shock, others in applause, others in disbelief. Reporters shouted questions, flashes lit up the stage, and officials scrambled. Ruth Lynn rose slowly, the crowd parting as she stepped toward the stage. Clifford's chest tightened. He braced himself for her condemnation. But Ruth Lynn stopped at the foot of the podium. Her voice was steady, low but powerful. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you mocked me. You tried to compete with me. You represent everything I fought against. But today you've done something rare. You told the truth even though it cost you everything." The room quieted again. Ruth Lynn's gaze softened, though her tone remained firm. Redemption doesn't erase harm. But it can open the door to healing. If your actions match your words, then maybe, for the first time, we're not on opposite sides. Clifford swallowed hard, nodding, humbled in a way he had never known. Weeks later, Ruth Lynn sat in a courtroom beside Darius, their hands clasped. Clifford sat quietly in the back, no longer the polished executive but a man who chose accountability over comfort. And when the judge finally announced that Darius's conviction was overturned, tears streamed down Ruth Lynn's face as the weight of years lifted at last. Outside, reporters swarmed. Cameras rolled. Darius was free. As Ruth Lynn guided her brother through the crowd, the old Corolla waited at the curb. Reporters pointed at it, whispering, "That's her car? She still drives that." Ruth Lynn simply smiled, resting her hand on the hood. "This car carried me through storms most people couldn't survive. It's not just a car, it's a story of endurance." Darius laughed, wiping his eyes. "Then let it keep carrying us, sis." And with Clifford watching quietly from the courthouse steps, Ruth Lynn slid behind the wheel, the engine sputtering to life like it always had. The old car rattled down the street, not as a symbol of struggle anymore but of triumph. Because Ruth Lynn Johnson was more than the woman mocked in a parking lot. She was proof that dignity, truth, and perseverance could outlast even the loudest arrogance. And this time there was no laugh to echo back. Only silence, respect, and the beginning of a new chapter. Subscribe and give us a like if you want more of this content. Tell us where you are watching from.